Greetings, friends. My name is Pavel Stelmach, and now we'll dive into the top news of this day. Russian offensive potential is declining. Current Russian attacks are focused on distracting and dispersing Ukrainian troops in anticipation of the counterattack operations. On the air of a single marathon, the head of the Council of Reservists of the Ground Forces of Ukraine, Ivan Tymochko, said that the enemy is trying to attack in directions, but that these are not longer attacks to break through our front line, but attempts to withdraw our forces from specific directions so that we cannot start, in their understanding, our announced counterattack. Currently, there are no serious advances of Russian troops along the entire front line.
The enemy could not seriously move forward anywhere. The attacks on Avdiivka were choked. Fighting in Bakhmut continues. If the intensity has decreased somewhat in the city, it is at the same level as it was in the suburbs. But Bakhmut did not give up. Vuhledar will be studied in history as a successful counterattack against the enemy at the operational level. Ivan Tymochko, head of the Council of Reservists of the Ukrainian Ground Forces, on the national Ukrainian teletone.
Despite all the difficulties, it is possible to evacuate the local population from Avdiivka. At the same time, fighting continues in the Marinka direction. The city actually ceased to exist, but it is not in the hands of the Russians. At the same time, Ukraine is making progress in the counter-battery fights, thanks to the help of Western partners. At the same time, analysts of Institute for the Study of War note that the shortage of shells in Russia will eventually undermine the ability of the Russian armed forces to compensate for their weakness with the help of artillery. Already now, the Russian authorities are looking for a replacement for private military company Wagner. One of the reasons for Moscow looking for a replacement for Wagner's mercenaries is that the group's founder, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has repeatedly came into direct conflict with the Russian Ministry of Defense, which greatly irritates the Russian military leadership, which is used to strict subordination.
At the war, it became clear that Prigozhin was an alien element in the entire Russian system, and even with his political ambitions. And the problem is in Prigozhin himself. If he had been dependent and accommodating and did not have such ambitious plans, it would probably be possible to coexist somehow further. But now it is obvious that he was pulling the blanket over himself. He wanted money and power and legalization of it. His position was justified only by the fact that he was Putin's cook. Now his time is up. Now the need for people like Prigozhin is gone. He on the base PMC Wagner created an understandable form of such organization.
Moscow hopes that alternative private combat units will be easier to keep under control. The problem is that currently no other known Russian PMC even comes close to Wagner in terms of numbers and combat power. Otherwise, the logic of the Russian command, which prefers to fight in Ukraine with mercenary forces, is quite clear. They are much more effective even than soldiers of the regular Russian army, and the main cost of their maintenance falls on the shoulders of private business. In addition, Moscow rightly believes that heavy losses of PMC personnel are much more acceptable for Russian society and do not cause a sharp increase in anti-war sentiments in the country itself. But Russia already has enormous problems with mobilization. On April 1st, another draft began, at the expense of which they will replenish their reserves. At the same time, ordinary Russians do not really want to join the army, and it is understandable why. After losing more than 60,000 soldiers in the first 3 months of 2023, not many will be willing to go on meat assaults. Therefore, we can expect mobilization in Belarus. It is not for nothing that Shoigu, the Minister of the Minister of Defense of Russia, suddenly flew to Minsk for a meeting with Lukashenko. And once again, we can expect calls for a truce, which are increasingly heard from the Russian corridors of power. Well, we expect that they will offer the Easter truce or something as well. Russians know how to use religion for their own purposes, all the more so that now they are afraid of a Ukrainian counterattack, which will happen, and when it happens, it is not worth trying to find out the plans of the Ukrainian General Staff. By the way, about the counterattack, everyone is talking about it so much that they probably named all possible start dates up to October. However, we are still preparing. We train the military, collect equipment, And what is pleasing is that it is not only equipment purchased by the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense or provided by governments of partner countries. We also receive our military equipment from ordinary Ukrainians or Europeans. For example, the charitable funds of Lithuania raised money for the purchase of radars in Israel for Ukrainian air defense forces. At the end of January, yellow posters with the blue inscription Radarom appeared on the streets of Vilnius. Let's radar, and the letter O was replaced by a sunflower, the symbol of Ukraine. Below is a short 4-digit number, well known to all residents of Lithuania. It can be used to make a donation to the Blue-Yellow Fund, which helps Ukraine, which is defending itself. It was decided to collect money for the Israeli raiders before the anniversary of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. Each radar costs 1 million euros. 14 million were collected for the purchase in Israel, which managed to buy 16 radars. As we are used to, buyers received a wholesale discount. Residents of the small Baltic country decided to surprise the world again with their next initiative after the Bayraktar action thundered in the spring. But money came from auctions, charity events, and concert fees. Various safe artifacts from the battlefields went to auctions. Athletes put the Olympic and Paralympic gold under the hammer for sale. President Dalia Grybauskaite auctioned her book Enough to Worry, a presidential pen and a mug with her image from the 2014 presidential campaign. Every day, the well-known Lithuanian TV journalist Andrius Tapinas published the collected sums on his page in the social network, and on the last day he held a 3-hour telecast that ended the charity marathon, in which the president of Lithuania, Gitanas Nausėda, also took part. The latest Eurobarometer poll published on a year after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine shows that Europeans are still in solidarity with Ukrainians. 91% of respondents agree with the provision of humanitarian aid to Ukraine, and 88% favor the admission of Ukrainian refugees to the EU. Providing financial support to Ukraine is approved by 77%, and economic sanctions against the Russian government, companies, and private individuals are also supported by respondents. The majority of Europeans are in favor of a ban on broadcasting of Russian state media and EU funding for the purchase and supply of military equipment to Ukraine. In general, the majority of European citizens are still satisfied with the European Union's response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. EU citizens also overwhelmingly support the acceleration of the energy transition, in particular investments in renewable energy sources and actions to reduce the EU's dependence on Russian energy sources. And we are appreciating your support too. But not only ordinary Europeans are currently helping Ukrainians to win the war, politicians also work. Here, for example, over the Chinese direction. Last week, French President Emmanuel Macron and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen flew to Beijing. The High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Josep Borrell, will go there next week, and even the first results of the trip. According to Bloomberg, Xi Jinping thanked Emmanuel Macron for clarifying a number of issues regarding Ukraine.
The main goal was to study the position of Europe and offer Europe strategic autonomy. That is, China pursued its plan to separate Europe from the United States in order to break the coalition of solidarity that stands behind Ukraine and which, after the victory of Ukraine, can take over China. China pursued the line of separating Europe from the United States, probing the position of different countries. They understood how to work with different countries.
I will remind you that according to Ursula von der Leyen, Xi Jinping promised to talk with Volodymyr Zelensky when the time is right. But for now, as Macron put it, military weather continuing in the war against Ukraine. At the same time, the French leader in Beijing spoke about the need to bring China to joint responsibility for peace and stability in international affairs, including Ukraine, Iran, and North Korea, especially since there are now fears that China will supply Russia with weapons, which we and the Europeans usually oppose.
We also count on China not to provide any military equipment directly or indirectly to Russia, because we all know arming the aggressor would be against international law and it would significantly harm our relationship.
On the anniversary of Russia's large-scale invasion of Ukraine, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the People's Republic of China published a document in which China's proposals for ending Russia's war against Ukraine were formulated. It contains 12 points about the resumption of peace negotiations, ceasing hostilities. All parties should support Russia and Ukraine in working in the same direction, and as soon as possible resumption of direct dialogue in order to gradually de-escalate the situation, respect for the sovereignty of all countries, and other. The document is posted on the website of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the People's Republic of China and is called China's Position on the Political Settlement of the Ukrainian Crisis. His status are criticized in official Kyiv, as well as countries that support Ukraine in the war against Russia. It is very important that the West does not overestimate the role of China and does not make any concessions that China may interpret as weakness of the West. The fact that the West is now listening to nuclear threats and blackmail from Moscow and very gradually providing assistance to Ukraine is not a very good signal for the security situation related to China. In his opinion, China sees that Russia is succeeding to a certain extent in nuclear blackmail and can use this understanding of the situation in the future around Taiwan. China notes that in the Paris-Beijing dialogue, the United States plays the role of an absent third because the US-China relationship is critically important for the parties. That concludes our today's video. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for future videos. Goodbye.